Okay, let's come on in and have a seat, please. I'm gonna wait just a minute or two because I saw people in the lobby, and we have a very special treat this afternoon that I do not want anyone to miss because their life will be poor for it. Okay, here we go. So today we have a real treat for us. As you know, the arts are an indispensable part of a classical education. In the words of George Gershwin, true music must repeat the thoughts and inspiration of the people and the time. Wonder and joy have been our theme throughout the last 2 days, and I can think of no better way to actively express wonder and joy than through the performance of music. Our students from Founders Classical Academy of Frisco, with the help of their wonderful music teachers, Wesley Peart and Harold Sprouse, have prepared a brief concert for your entertainment this afternoon. So please welcome our students from Founders Frisco.
Hello, my name is Maria Lenskog, and this is Charles Borders and Micah Plummer. We will be playing Ludwig van Beethoven's Trio No. 5 for violin, cello, and piano, Opus 70, Movement 1 in D major. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Julia Mukaida, and today I will be playing two pieces for you. The first one is going to be Allegro by Franz Joseph Natterman, and the second one is Chanson de Mai by Alphonse Hasselmann. I hope you enjoy.
My name is Julia Corcoran, and today we will be playing London Trio No. 2 in G major by Franz Joseph Haydn. On flute we have Sabrina, Dia, and Ram. Then on cello we have Charles. Thank you.
easy. Okay, you gonna come get the harp? Oh, standing up. Okay. You gonna come get the harp? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move the harp off really quickly, but wasn't that incredible? Also, Derek, I think we do need to move the 2 mics down. Dr. Roper is gonna have Q&A after this. If y'all will just bear with us for about 1 minute as we transition. I have a phone, lost and found. Actually, kind of looks like Colton Moore. I don't know if he's in here. But anybody's phone was found in the men's restroom. Is that right? Does anybody know? Oh. Yeah, he probably is. I'm pretty sure this is him. Mr. List, tell me if this is him. Okay. Mr. List has Mr. Moore's phone if he asks. So anyway, thank you so much. So our final session today will be taught by Dr. Gregory Roper. After that, he will have a brief Q&A, and then if y'all could stay seated just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll send you on our way. Dr. Roper is an associate professor of English at the University of Dallas. His specialty is Middle English literature, including the works of Geoffrey Chaucer and the Gawain poet. He is also interested in questions of classical pedagogy and writing, and has published the Writer's Workshop and the forthcoming Mastering the 4 Arguments. Currently is completing a manuscript contrasting progressive education with liberal education that describes the brain worms of the former and the education for freedom of the latter. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gregory Roper.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the work you do, for sending me such great students. First off, let me just say that everything I'm about to say about wonder was just right here on stage. So please, another hand for the musicians. That was just, wow. About 2.5 weeks ago, I did something crazy. I took on the job of interim dean of students for the fall semester. And I have been thinking about ADA requirements and disciplinary problems and all those sorts of things. And today we had to move all of our offices. So I'm a little rattled today. Things have been a little bit crazy. IT people yelling at me about the computers need to be doing this, and facilities people saying, I didn't know we had to take down that stuff. So it was just wonderful to come in here and just have that moment of wonder and have that moment of beauty for us. So just perfect example of everything. And yes, I am working on a book that contrasts in the first half what I call the brain worms of a certain kind of education. Those I took the idea from the radio notion of the earworm, right? The song that gets stuck in your head and you can't get it out of your head. And what I found at my son's school, public school, was I kept going to these meetings and I kept hearing these kinds of phrases and things over and over again that people just repeated. And they seemed to repeat them in a way that they would, and as if they were just obvious facts. And they then based an entire approach to education based upon what I thought of as just sort of brainworms. It's these kind of slogans. The very first one that I take on the book is, that I think is actually kind of the foundation of all of them, and maybe therefore the most damaging, is this notion that, and I heard this over and over and over again, in 12 years, everything will be different. Right? We cannot teach any knowledge, any content, because 12 years from now, all of the knowledge will be different. And all the jobs will be different. And everything will be different. And right, this becomes the excuse to denude the whole curriculum of any content. We can't teach any actual information. We can't teach any actual knowledge. Or else to do so is kind of silly, because in 12 years, it'll all be different. And I left that particular meeting, and I went for a drive around my hometown now of Coppell, Texas. And we happened to have just been there for 13 years at that point. And I drove around and I said, that lawyer's business was there 12 years ago, and that office was there 12 years ago, and those people were doing those things 12 years ago. And I even called up my scout father friends in the IT business, and I asked them a series of questions. I said, has everything literally changed in 12 years? And these people sort of at the cutting edge of everything that is kind of used as the example here said, no. I said, were there website optimizers 12 years ago? Yep. Were there, and I went, and they're like, nope. I went to school and I talked to a biologist friend of mine, and I said, was the DNA molecule still the DNA molecule 12 years ago? Yes, it was. RNA? Yes, it was. So I just began to sort of think about it, and I went back over some of these brainworms that I just kept hearing over and over again. And I thought I wanted to talk to parents especially who are hearing these brainworms over and over again, because I had a tearful call from a friend of mine about halfway through all of these different meetings I was going to. And she was saying, I know this is not working for my daughter. She comes home crying every day. She's not learning how to long divide. I know it's not working, but everything they say sounds so good, Greg. And I said, it's not good. No, it's not. And it doesn't make sense. And it's not historically based. And she said, well, could you write some of this down? Because you seem to be able to. So I started, that's how books are born. Somebody says, do something. But in the second half, what I really want to try to do is make a case for a different kind of education, or different ends of education, different ideas of education, and maybe put some different sorts of things into parents' heads that they might want to seek out as a form of education. And lo and behold, I found it in the kinds of schools you guys are teaching in, and the wonderful things that you all are doing. The notion of a liberal education, an education for freedom. But I decided I wanted to start the second half of the book with something really fundamental. And so that's what you're about to get today, is the first chapter of the second half of the book about the first goal of education being wonder. So here goes. By the way, at the end, tell me everything I've got wrong, ask questions. I end with asking you to help me, and I really do need your help. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I could see the beaten up white desk, a desk which had been my sister Susan's before she went off to college and had been handed down to me. I could feel the matching white wooden chair where I was sitting in my room in suburban Maryland. A ninth grader reading a book called The Language of Life for his science fair project. The previous year, inspired by that older sister's telling me about her genetics class in college, I'd become completely hooked on genetics and on questions of inheritance, how these things called genes shaped what kind of a nose we have, our blood type, the color of our eyes, the shape of an earlobe. This was a time in the 1970s, yeah, I'm getting that old, when junior high school biology courses and textbooks didn't even have a chapter on this sort of thing. And so my sister had told me about DNA and its beautiful double helical shape, and how a pattern of 4 simple bases encodes all of our inheritance. But the process of how this all happened was still opaque to me. The 8th grade science fair project had been about asking all of my relatives whether they had detached or attached earlobes and whether their ring finger was longer than their index finger and what their blood type was. And I charted all of that out and tried to find the recessive genes and the dominant genes. This year I wanted to do something more. I don't even remember the author's name, which is a pity because he explained it all so well, so clearly. That day, that chapter was taking me right into the heart of what I wanted to know. How the double helix unwinds, how the messenger RNA binds to the DNA's base pairs, how next the transfer RNA groups of 3 bases each bind to the messenger RNA, how they figured out it has to be groups of 3 bases, how an amino acid then attaches to each transfer RNA segment, locks into a chain, and becomes a protein, which becomes me. Wow, I thought, that's how it works. I remember thinking it's so elegant and simple and clear and, well, beautiful. I can remember it all more than 40 years later. The angle at which I was tipped back in my chair, the chips in the paint on the desk, the carpet at my feet. Because what I experienced at that moment is one of the fundamental and uniquely human emotions, wonder. I just stopped on that gray Maryland afternoon and put the book down. This feeling filled me, a deep sense of satisfaction at having finally understood, joy at how amazing the universe and humans and the plan of biological creation is, and humility at seeing something so simple and elegant and fine-tuned and perfect that I could never have conceived it on my own, that results in the complex phenomenon that is the human body. That I just wanted to stay in the moment, to sit back and let it wash over me. Wow. So that's it. That's where my nose comes from. The odd shape of my eyebrows that are like and unlike my father's. That's how it works. That's how nature designed it. This is perhaps the first and most fundamental goal of education, to enable wonder to happen in our students. If you don't have that, if you can't create that, at least sometimes and in some ways, then I would argue you missed one of the fundamental purposes of education, and it could be that not much else will matter much. And I want to start here in the second half of the book, in a series of essays on the purpose of education, because I think it's so fundamental and so easy to forget, and therefore I want to say it again. One of the central purposes of education is to enable wonder in our students. Now, it might not happen, surely won't happen in the same way, at the same time, in the same subjects for all students, and definitely not at the same time. One student like me might find it in the DNA molecule. Another might find it in the tenderness of a simple key modulation in a Beethoven sonata that turns a simple melody into the sound of aching heartbreak. Another might find it in the strangeness of Fibonacci sequences and their appearances in nature. Another might, like one of my sons, find it in the elegance of an electronic circuit or the clean logic of 1,000 lines of code. For many, the incredible distances and powerful images of astronomy do it. For others, pigment on a canvas. But it should happen. In fact, I would argue it has to happen to every student at some point for education to go forward. Why? Because this sense of wonder is fundamental to us as humans. We're the wondering species, Homo admirans, you might say. Humans are the beings who look about them and experience awe and amazement, humbled by the huge truths and stunning things that they see. We wonder about things, that is, we ponder them. And this leads us to the state of wonder. At the core of philosophy, art, science, psychology, history, economics, every aspect of human endeavor worth doing is wonder. We feed on wonder, and it feeds us. And if our educational systems and processes and curricular innovations do not feed us on our most fundamental nature, they're not going to do much of anything else very well. But if they do, If a student catches the scent of something amazing and follows it into a full-fledged experience of wonder, it becomes the delicious feeling that leads him or her into ever more powerful experiences. To those who've experienced this kind of wonder, the rest is worth the work, the hard work, even the drudgery that intellectual effort often requires, so they can capture and experience and renew that power of wonder, which is the power of the deepest experience of the cosmos within them. At one point in writing this, I had in the previous paragraph said that the experience of wonder is like a drug that hooks the thinker. But my colleague Brett Bourbon, ever alert to language and metaphor and clarity of thinking, corrected me. No, he said, drugs and their effects are the opposite of wonder. Drugs wash over you, infecting your system in ways that distort us and eventually enslave us. And wonder's the opposite, he said. And he's right. Wonder is so wonderful because it frees us by speaking to the deepest parts of our being and opening us up to the world. In a society so focused on the individual and individual rights, says Monsignor John Armitage in England, wonder and awe makes us realize we're part of something much bigger. It teaches us we're not the center of the universe. We're in awe of our parents, or maybe our teachers, or other adults who led us and showed us the way, full of admiration for them, and this fills us with joy. So wonder inculcates humility and connection and truth, the opposite of what weed and coke and smack do. So I want to ask all of us, every administrator, every teacher, all of us who do this great work, when will the students experience a sense of wonder in your school, in your curriculum, in your classroom? What are we doing to enable that to happen? How are we going to help them to those moments when they sit back in awe? Now, let's admit at the beginning that you can't make wonder happen. The very nature of it being forced causes wonder to flee. Wonder instead is that feeling that comes to us almost unexpected, unsuspected, unbidden. It sneaks up on you, finds you when you least expect it. I wasn't expecting to experience wonder that day in junior high. I was just reading for my science fair project. But suddenly I was gripping the book, going deeper and deeper into truths I didn't realize I was going to find. That's why I said we should strive to enable wonder in our students, not make it happen. So it can't be forced, but it can be prepared for. In fact, most of the time, it must be prepared for, or it won't happen. So how can we prepare for it? First, wonder often starts with someone sharing his or her own wonder. My sister came back from her college genetics class and just babbled away at me about all the things she was learning. How many narratives of great accomplishment in athletics and physics, in music, in cooking begin this way? I love to learn the art of cuisine standing next to my grandmother as she lovingly made tamales every Christmas for a huge extended family. When Dr. So-and-so first described the word of subatomic particles, I could feel the hair standing on the back of my neck. He was so excited, he was so passionate about it, that I found myself caught up in his enthusiasm. See, this is why education needs not just facilitators, but teachers, mentors, sharers. It's why the lecture is not a moribund form, but one of the essential modes of teaching. We catch wonder like a scent, sniffing it in the air when we watch and hear someone else share her awe. Can we catch it from our fellow students in group work? Maybe. One of my chapters in the first half of the book is called Why Group Work Doesn't. I'm not usually really witty, but I'm kind of proud of that one. I actually don't see wonder happening very often in group work. There's something about an authority figure, a teacher, a scout leader, a grandmother, sharing the sense of wonder, which makes it more powerful, more telling, more significant. If another teenager is suddenly excited about Mozart, it's likely to be the excitement of the day, right? Sure, his friends think next week it'll be something else. Or they'll dismiss it as something weird and geeky and part of that friend's kind of quirky nerdiness. But when an adult, especially an adult whom students see as experienced, knowledgeable, and mature, and the teenager thinks tired and weary and boring, shows this excitement, this childlike sense of amazement and awe, young people sit up and take notice. So second, it usually depends upon prior significant knowledge. We might catch the excitement of the mentor at first, but we don't often experience that sense of awe ourselves unless and until it's grounded in and informed by some significant prior knowledge. Look again at my experience. I thought genetics was pretty cool, but I didn't have that experience of wonder, of awe, until I'd learned a pretty good amount, had questions, and finally come to the place where I could understand the mechanism of transfer RNA. It's the player and fan who really knows a sport who's most in awe of the brilliant fake, the stunningly simple play call. For many years, and I lived this, many Americans thought soccer was boring because they just didn't know the game. Now I see more and more people who cheer and are amazed by the subtle moves in the middle of the field that have nothing to do with scoring a goal. And it's really exciting to see that. But it's come from gradual, slow buildup of knowledge and understanding about the game that most Americans didn't have when I first started playing. You have to know some particle physics to see how beautiful, how intricate, and yet so simple the whole thing is, and be amazed by it. A walk in the woods is nice, but the person who knows botany and ecology is much more likely to notice, to perceive, and to be overcome by the amazing things found there. I remember learning jazz improvisation with my sax teacher, Mike Cogswell. He drilled me on chord structures and changes and showed me over and over again how complex and intricate these things were in the bebop music of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. Then he showed me Thelonious Monk. I liked Monk's music, sort of, but found it strange and dissonant and a bit weird. Mike circled around towards a piece of Monk's, and he showed me how, against all of the trends of the hard bop music of the 1950s, at a certain place, Monk just walks up the chromatic scale, a half step at a time. It was ridiculously simple, but clearly deliberate. He looked over the neck of his saxophone and said, "Dig that?" All of a sudden it hit me, Monk was making fun of all of these guys, but in a way that only those guys knew, right, that complexity and could appreciate the in-joke at themselves. That's why he was called the Clown Prince of Jazz, Mike said. Monk's never been the same for me since. I listen to him every time, and I laugh out loud, amazed, in awe, wonder-filled, because he's the holy fool of jazz. And to listen to him, now that I know and understand, is the experience of awe and pure delight. But I had to know a great deal before I could have appreciated that. I had to be prepared by dense content and hard work. Wonder is like this. It comes to those who've done the hard work to prepare for it, so that at that significant moment, understanding and amazement rushes in all of a sudden. So wonder can't be pursued, but it must be prepared for. You have to do the learning, the working, the memorizing, and then it's more likely to happen. Our schools have to convey this message, and they must help it happen by giving students rich content, rich reading and fiction and poetry, rich experiences of music and visual arts, and rich understandings of history and sciences and math, or wonder will be strangled in the cradle, never able to spread its wings. Third, wonder is closely allied to beauty and joy, and usually comes from an experience of beauty and joy. When we're filled with wonder, looking at a night sky full of stars, seeing the intricate legs of a praying mantis, considering a cavalry charge across an open field, our response is often, "Whoa, that's beautiful." As Thomas Aquinas notes, we respond to the integrity, consonance, and radiance of the thing. It comes from seeing the parts of the thing so carefully aligned that everything fits. It comes from a kind of shining meaning of the thing that we're observing that leaps out at us, even though we can't articulate it. We pause to contemplate, to be absorbed in the organic wholeness of this thing, attentive to the smallest detail and the large view of the whole. This doesn't mean anyway that wonder comes only through the narrow fields that we now call the fine arts. The fields of natural science or mathematical proof call us into wonder because they're beautiful as well. My own early love and wonder at the DNA molecule was absolutely tied to the elegance of the double helical form. Robert Wood, who taught me aesthetics, once said that if you go into a contemporary art museum these days, you hear people saying things like, "Oh, that's fascinating," and "My, that's an important statement." He said, you very rarely hear them say, "That's beautiful." But he went on to say, but if you get 10 working class guys who've never had a college education, all sitting in a corner bar, and they see an NBA player feint, spin, twist, and lay in a perfect shot off of his fingertips, they leap up, hug one another, and say, what? "That was beautiful. Oh my God, that was gorgeous. The man's an artist." Right? For Bob, the working class guys knew something that the sophisticated art elite do not know, or have forgotten, that they once had an experience of beauty that leads to wonder. From a young age, students have an affinity for the beautiful and for how it leads them to wonder. They see butterflies or ladybugs or a field of fireflies and have that sense of delight that leads them to wonder. But at some point, we stop talking about beauty as if we're embarrassed by the word, and students begin to think it's not serious to talk in this way. Instead, we need to talk constantly about the beauty of our subjects, allowing students to see our own delight in this beauty and helping them not to be embarrassed at their response to it. Fifth, wonder is almost never about utility. In fact, one of the best ways to drive it away is to overemphasize utility. I hope you can see I'm picking up ideas in the first half of the book and trying to suggest that wonder is the antidote. "Oh, how marvelous. I'll be able to use that in my career someday. That understanding of how galaxies form is really going to help me get ahead in the marketplace." We all realize this is silly talk, right? We're not blown away, sent into awe, because we find something immediately useful for our day-to-day grind. No, we wonder at and are consumed by wonder simply at the existence of the thing, the phenomenon, the artistic accomplishment, simply because it is, because it exists. In that sense, wonder is always philosophical, metaphysical. We wonder at things when we grasp what the medieval philosopher Duns Scotus calls their heichitas, their thisness. We love the DNA molecule, the Scarlet Tanager, the late Beethoven quartets, because they're elegant and simple, and they are. I remember listening to an NPR essay in which a father remarked on his first grade son's class studying the ancient Egyptians. He first was concerned that they were spending so much time on such a useless subject, but then he caught the scent of his own son's excitement. "I realized through my son's eyes," he said, "the main and perhaps only reason to study subjects like this. Because ancient Egypt is cool. It's cool that they use a hook to pull your brains out through your nose when you die. Every 6-year-old boy loves that part. It's cool that the Nile floods every year and provides life for an entire civilization." Once again, I hear one of my favorite books, Joseph Pieper's Leisure, the Basis of Culture, and he talks about how this deep philosophical sense allows us to pierce the dome of the workaday world and live larger, more expansive lives. And nothing can drive away wonder more quickly than a relentless emphasis on the practical, the career-oriented, the future usefulness of studying something. I don't know how many times in all these meetings I heard, "We have to get our students workplace ready." And I thought, no, I don't. For Pieper, if all we do is serve that workaday world, we remain locked in it, and therefore are never fully human. The minute you begin making learning's primary purpose to get a job, to get a high GPA, to score well on the SAT, you take away the free world of delight for its own sake, and you push students into doing something only for what it will get them later, not for the stunning thisness of the things. This, how will I use this in my career kind of questions are the questions that sink our teacher's heart the most, aren't they? Because we know that those questions drive out even the possibility that students will take delight in the simple joy of learning that something is, and that it is in itself wonderful. Shakespeare, Van Gogh, the periodic table, game theory. So when I rail against the vocationalist turn in education, and I do that often, at the deepest level, that's what I'm railing against, that it cheats students out of the chance to become deeply human. Sixth, but an emphasis on fun or creativity or relevance can just as surely drive wonder away. Right? Paradoxically, the opposite attempt of trying to force delight by focusing all the educational energy on being fun, being creative, having high-level relevant experiences, drives away wonder just as surely as a focus on workforce readiness. We all know the experience of the teacher, the coach, the leader who so desperately focuses on making everything fun and exciting that none of it is fun or exciting. Right? When we pander to our students by making group projects be about the comic books they already know, to insist that presentations be hip and contemporary, results in students who are often frankly bored at all these attempts. And their reaction is not a deep, genuine wonder, but instead a jaded meh. They already have that. They already live in that world. That doesn't, take them out. I think why is that it comes to this. Wonder comes from an experience of utter otherness, of something so far outside of us, outside of our own experience, so much more massive and all-encompassing, or maybe sometimes, conversely, so minuscule, so impossibly tiny, that we're overwhelmed by it. We wonder at the Grand Canyon. We wonder at neutrinos. We don't achieve wonder by coming back to the things we already know, the likes we already have, unless, we somehow can see those things in a new way or experience them as if for the first time. A student allowed to stay in his own world of comic books and Starbucks, suburbs and their values, does not have as many chances to reach beyond that world and experience awe and what lies beyond his life. So wonder comes paradoxically not through focusing on having fun, but through doing some hard work, through focus and determination and dedication and drive. Think of a violinist and all the work that goes into preparing a wonder-inspiring performance. Think of a craftsman during his long and determined work to shape wood into a cello. Suddenly sitting back in awe at the beauty, the properties, the sounds that can be produced by wood from an ordinary tree. Think of the hours of dedicated practice that went into that amazing moment on the hockey rink where the player collected the puck out of the air, spun, faked one shot, and softly placed the perfect shot in the opposite corner of the net. So when I rail against the over-reliance on the relevant in education, when I decry projects that seem to pander by students by being about things they already know in pop culture, I'm doing so because, again, I think it short-circuits their chances to be homo admirans and experience the wonder of the human. I end then with the paradox of wonder in education. We can't make it happen, but we absolutely must help it happen, or nothing else will matter much. We don't construct curricula to engineer wonder directly, but if we don't see it as one of the primary ends, something happening almost beside our efforts, inter alia, along the way, we'll miss the point of what we're doing. I'm searching for the right word to use. I tried enable. We're already able to experience wonder. Facilitate? No, it's not facility we need, a term borrowed from the business world that devolves teaching into a technical enterprise, and the teacher is technician. So I'd love for you all to help me here. For now, I just want to return to the word educate, to lead out. And by the way, that's what I take on in the next chapter. Look, I don't educate people so they can get jobs. My sense is if they do well, learn the rich material, and develop the right attitudes and qualities, the jobs will take care of themselves. I once had a wonderful soccer coach who said, stop trying to score goals. Do all the little things right, and the goals will come. I don't educate students so that they can be relevant to the modern world. I'd much rather them see how irrelevant much of the modern world is to a life well lived. I educate students so they can grasp the truth. And when they do that, they will, I'm sure of it, wonder at the beauty of truth. I educate students so students can be more fully human, more fully alive to a rich human life. I trust you do too. Good luck to you. Have a great year. Okay, so I said I'd take some questions or comments. I really need some help on that word, so somebody come up and tell me the right word to use. I'm sorry, you're supposed to come to the microphones, is that it? Okay.
Howdy. Thank you for that inspiring lecture. Are you looking for the word inspire? That is that which elicits wonder?
I think that's
Something
closer
like
to it. Yeah, because inspire means to breathe into.
With spirit.
With spirit, right? So, but I think I'm always worried that about myself when I try too hard to be inspirational in the classroom. Then that makes them think like, we have to be at this pitch every day. And I do want to talk about the hard work as well. But I think inspire is that, I think that's getting closer.
So I want to make two brief comments.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for your book that's on writing by imitation.
Oh, thank you.
That's your work, right?
That is my work.
I was running a school and trying to get composition teachers to use that way that Franklin did in imitating the spectator. Learn by emulation.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to show how it was done, and boom, your book came out a couple years later, and so I've recommended it. If composition teachers in here are looking for a book to use that way, this is a gentleman to find it from.
So my day, my week, my year is now just made. Thank you. Somebody said, oh, your book. It's the biggest ego trip in the world, so thank you. I appreciate it. But I'd love to come back and talk to you guys about that. I just did a course in the classical education program, which I'm supposed to pump on here, but I think that's kind of cheap. But I just did a whole course, and we had a great time, a blast with 26 people, teachers, all doing a great job with it.
Excellent.
So, thank you.
The second quick thing I want to say with regard to founders and the founders, the founding fathers, I think this is something that's untapped that you might want to pursue, but nobody ever talks about science and how much it influenced folks like Madison. And so when John Witherspoon came over to Princeton, the first thing he got was an orrery and had to raise a bunch of money to get it. It was basically a model of the solar system. And so Madison, as a kid at Princeton, would have seen this. And I'm convinced that Newton had a greater influence on the founders than people give him credit for. And in the constitutional debates, there are references to planets, to the order of the universe and whatnot. And so I'm wondering if that would be that source of wonder that then translates into an actual constitutional government. It's
a marvelous, marvelous comment. And now that you've said a nice thing about me, now you've said the awful thing about me, which is I have to learn a whole lot more. But no, those guys all had the kinds of liberal educations we're talking about. They all had this amazing education, rich in content, right? Rich in things they had memorized. They had this huge storehouse of things in their head, and that expected hard work of them. I don't know if you guys know the book. I think his name is Jeff Colvin. Talent is Overrated. Where he talks about he starts the book by talking about the difference between really, really talented musicians who make it up into the symphony orchestras of the really big top symphony orchestras of the world, and the people who never quite make it that far. And his point is, the kind of the 10,000 hours thing, but that it takes an enormous amount of hard work. And you have to be willing to put in that hard work. And his point is, that work is what we call talent. Everybody says, oh, he's so talented. No, he just worked a lot harder than everyone else did. But as he gets further in the book, and I find this really fascinating, he says, well, what inspired them to actually, there's the word, what inspired them to work so hard, to pick up the violin and play for 4 hours every day when they were 9 years old? And he says it comes back to, when you hear these people's stories, it comes back to an original experience of something powerful that happened to them. Right? Does that something happen when they were 8, playing the violin that was so powerful that they said, I don't care how much hard work it takes, I want to be able to do this. I want to, that someone took them to a Yo-Yo Ma concert and they said, I don't care how many hours, I'm going to learn to play like he did. Right? And so that it's that wonder, that's the original thing that drives you to do the hard work so you can feed on that wonder some more. And we teach students on both ends, I think. If we don't help them to have that sense of wonder and then don't say that, but it takes a lot of hard work, then they're never going to get there. I was debating this book with a grad student friend of mine, and she said, no, I just have a friend, he's just great at Latin. I mean, he just does the declensions like over and over again, and he just seems to love it, and so he just does it all the time. And I went, I think you just proved my point. Right? He had something that happened to him that he just loves the Latin language now, and it doesn't matter how much hard work it is. Me, after about 10 minutes of declensions, I'm dead. It's the same thing with a sport or with painting, with anything else. So thank you for that.
Hi, so I'm a history teacher, but since you come, your sense of wonder was from a science perspective, and I actually come from a very strong background of science myself. I like to propose the word catalyze.
Ooh.
That's all I have.
That's enough. Get out my pen. Wait a minute. Largely because of this experience, I was a biochem major until my junior year. So I love that. And I love that idea, right, is that we're present for it, for our students, but we don't have to take part in their reaction. We're sort of standing on the side, right? Oh, I like that. Ooh. Catalyze this. Keep it coming, folks. Keep it coming. This is a great day for me.
Good afternoon, Dr. Roper. This is Saeed Polanco from El Paso Classical. Thank you for your lecture. Being a fellow biochem major, I liked how you talked about DNA, Watson and Crick, Rosalind Franklin. All these images came back to my head of reading the story of that, wouldn't call it maybe a discovery, because they already knew what DNA was, they just didn't know how to think about it.
It was right there.
So learning all the models, it brings to mind my genetics and cell biochem professor, who would tell me every time he would read a chapter, he would cry. And the students would just kind of look at him and kind of just stand kind of dull. So this leads to my question, sorry. Do you think modern technology, although it is impressive and wondrous when you stop and think about it, has it desensitized us, made us rather dull, less enthusiastic to the world around us? Light pollution, no more stars.
The short answer is yes, sadly. But it's more, I think it's more about distraction. I mean, look, this is an amazing thing. I mean, you should be filled with wonder that, I hold something in my pocket with, what is it like, you should tell me, there's something like 10,000 times the computing power of those guys sitting in the control room for Apollo 11, that's amazing. But what happens, I think, is we just get sucked in. And it's more about the distraction. I don't think you'd be filled with wonder when you're distracted. And I know this in myself, just as well. I'm having a harder time staying focused on a complex piece of reading. I have to take more breaks than I used to. And I don't think I don't think wonder can come in the midst of distraction. When you're doing this, right, when your brain is doing this all the time, you can't get into that sense of flow. I can never know how to pronounce that guy's name, Mikhaili Csikszentmihalyi or something like that, who wrote the great book on flow. But right, wonder comes from that sense of flow. It comes from having that long, focused attention on something where you can really devote your mind and your attention and your being to it. I think of a wood carver, just spending patient time, like looking at the grain and working with the grain and seeing that I have to work around that little place, right? And slowly, right, because he's so focused on, right, a little thing, right, suddenly he just is filled with awe, right, at the beauty of the wood. If he's checking his phone every 3 seconds and then coming back and doing a little bit more, it's not going to happen. So I guess my answer isn't technology per se. It's the distraction that technology has set in. And all of you who don't allow your students to have their phones, good for you. Bless you. They need some time away. We all do. And so when you have that time away, I think you can have that. Yeah, the light pollution, for instance, it's really awful. How far, in Dallas especially, how far you have to drive out to really have a beautiful experience of the stars. But when you do have that, I was in northern Minnesota canoeing with the Boy Scouts a little while back, and oh my gosh, you've never seen a sky like that. And to think that everyone, until fairly recently in human history, looked up in the sky and saw that, is to think they had wonder every night that they could stare at. So I guess it's not necessarily technology, it's the distraction that I'm seeing. My students are not able to go deeply into something long enough to have that sense of wonder. So anything you can do, maybe this is where catalyzing that equation, that chemical reaction comes in, is try to eliminate impurities in the chemical equation so that they can zoom in on the experience. And sometimes I feel terrible standing up here and saying, you guys know this. Why are you having me up here to say these kinds of things? You all know this way better than I do. By the way, whenever I speak to K through 12 teachers, I'm the one who's in awe of you guys. You guys do way more difficult, way more complex work every day, in and out. And I knew early on in my career I couldn't do that kind of work. By the way, middle school teachers, every middle school teacher, raise your hands. I don't know if you are Christians. I'm Roman Catholic. I think I've checked this out with the Pope. Purgatory does not exist for you guys. Like when you could kill 3 people the day you die, and St. Peter would just be like, "Oh, come on, you were in middle school for 12 years. I bow down to you all because those people are crazy. I've coached them in soccer before. Those kids are nuts, and you do it every day." I'm stunned by all of you.
So in thinking about wonder, the very beginning part of your discussion, I wrote down, think, wonder, and grow. So I'm wondering if grow or cultivate might be we want to cultivate wonder. We want to grow it. It starts with a seed and that rich content, that rich soil, and it's cyclical. We go through it in cycles, just like you had mentioned, that wonder is cyclical and it comes back and it feeds itself and it feeds us. So those were my thoughts.
That's lovely. Yeah, isn't that lovely, right? But also, right, that the humility of the gardener, right? I don't make those things grow, right? I have to cooperate with God's nature, with the cosmos. I can help, I can put some things in place, but mostly I'm going to sit back and watch. I have to do my role, but my role is right, not to make that tomato become a tomato. I can't do that. So I love that, and I love that it puts us in our proper place as well. So thank you. This is, man, what a day I'm having. I should come up here more often, guys. This is great.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a quick question going back to the question of distraction. Being that one thing that we have no control over, of course, is what home life is like for the students. And something that I think is true about cultivating, if we use that word, a sense of wonder in students is that it takes more than 45 minutes in the classroom to really accomplish that. And I think all of us know that like the ability to get off of technology is like it's so difficult. Like even for people who, you know, the older among us who like it came into their life like later on, it's still not easy for like my grandparents. You know, they watch TV all the time. You know, and it's not like they grew up with it that way. And so for these younger kids who their entire life, everybody they see, their parents themselves, is constantly, their attention is constantly being diverted away. So like, do you really think that there's like anything that we can do to actually, I don't know, reverse that process and give them the ability to like persist in silence and enjoy something? Because I think it's so, I mean, I struggle with that all the time. And, you know, and I'm very aware of that. And so trying to teach that to young children, I wonder what it is we can actually do that's most effective.
So, confession time. I heard a podcast about this book, The 24/6 Lifestyle, about a year and a half ago. It was kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. And this was a secular Jew who had gone back, and he was a hard-charging entrepreneur, 24/7 kind of a guy. You're like, I'm always on I'm always trying to create something. I'm always trying to figure something out. And he had discovered, gone back and discovered the power of the Sabbath in his own tradition. And he did the research and found out, that there have been studies on industrial accidents and how if in the early sort of days of the Industrial Revolution, the factories were more productive when they gave the workers Sunday off. And there were fewer accidents and there were fewer problems. And so he says, like, we've known for 100 years on the kind of sociology, psychology, economics standpoint that the Sabbath makes sense. And he says, it's bizarre that we've lost the thing that my people have known for 5,000, 10,000 years. And he said, I'm going to start observing the Sabbath. And he said the first Saturday, he couldn't make it till 10 o'clock. He said, by 10 o'clock, my finger was itching and I had to pick up my phone. And he said, that was the first thing. I was just going to not do anything electronic, for the Sabbath. He said, by 10 o'clock, I was done. And he said, after 2 months, he could make it to noon. So I said, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. I got up on Sunday, and I'm like, no, I have to see what the English soccer scores were yesterday. And I was the same way. I was like eking out. By 3 o'clock, I was a mess. I'm like, I'm going to clean something. The house was so perfectly clean, and my sons were like, "What are you doing?" I got to do something, right? So that's the first confession that I'm as bad as anybody else. So what to do about it? I do think that just having our classrooms be a countercultural space is a great first step. I think encouraging parents to try the idea of a Sabbath. As dean of students, one of the things I'm going to do is try to encourage my students to take a digital Sunday at our Catholic university and say, do something else. Pick up a physical book and read it. Okay, maybe if you can make it till 6 o'clock, then I'll let you start studying for Monday class. But I would say also don't despair. These things are tough. These forces are tough out there. But even just by making your own classroom this kind of sacred space where quiet, where diligence, where wonder can happen. And then again, sharing with them, your own geeky sense of wonder. I think we sometimes underestimate how powerful that is. And I think that we underestimate just, I was just giving a talk to a group of Catholic educators in Minnesota, and it was called How to Teach Anything. And one of my principals came from a mentor of mine who said 70% of what you teach is yourself. And I resisted that because I said, no, that's a cult of personality. I don't want to engage in the cult of personality. I want to teach the material. And he said, no, you're not understanding me. What you teach is your attitude toward the material, your approach to the material, the way you think about the material, the way you solve problems in the material. That's what I meant by 70% of what you teach is yourself. And I went away and I realized, and I thought about my own good teachers, my great teachers. And what I realized is he was exactly right, is that they were all different and they were all very different personalities, but what they shared with us was themselves through the subject. Steve Cushman at the University of Virginia, the most brilliant classroom teacher I've ever had. And he was always fully human, fully present to all of us. He was the best person at scanning an entire classroom and being able to look at just the bare glint in someone's eye and realizing she has a comment to make. And he had practiced continual scanning of the classroom. And he could then take your comment and draw it out further and draw it out further. Because that was just who he was. He took such delight in you and the insights you had about the poetry. And different teachers are different, but I realized, I'm just going to be Greg. And so if you create that space in the classroom where you're fully human to them, and again, think back to your own teachers and think back to your children's the teachers, the ones that they just come home and they're like, oh my God, Mr. Malpietti this and Mr. Malpietti that. That's all I heard all of the 7th grade. Because I know Michael, I taught Michael, and Michael is just out there every day, and he's going to share with you who he is and how much delight he takes in the world. So I would say that's our best antidote, is our own delight, our own geekiness, our own sort of holy foolishness. And yeah, they're going to mock you about it, and they make fun of you in the hallways, I can take that. Because I know that actually something's going to be there. And they actually, I think this is really true. Teenagers want your authentic self. They're desperate for it. And if you give it to them, they're going to, of course they're going to make fun of you. They're teenagers. But they really respect it, and they really need it, and they know that they need it. And they walk away from it knowing something's different.
Thank you. I remember a quote, well, I had to actually look it up, so I didn't quite remember it. It says, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. That's Thomas Edison said that. And so I was thinking about a word, and I was thinking stoked, or, like you stoke a fire.
Stoke a fire.
And how that one little ember, you just need just a little bit to just do so much. I want to say yay to my colleagues, because I'm telling you, as in the art room, students talk a lot more because, well, for one, they get the opportunity to do, and the excitement that they get when they're in Miss Nuttamundi's science class or Miss Evie's literature class, and they're talking about it, and then they're sharing, and it's a pretty cool place. And so if you get to work at Frisco, you're lucky.
That's great. Well, I think that's it. Never buy their cynicism. It's not real. It's something they're putting on. It's something they're putting on because they're teenagers and they need a little bit of a shield. But don't buy it. It's not real. They crave it. They crave wonder, and they're going to feed on it. So if you will inspire, catalyze, cultivate, and stoke them, you're going to be great. Have a great year. Love you all.
Okay, guys, well, I hope you have enjoyed the last 2 days, have formed some new friendships, feel inspired to tackle the new coming year. So before we pack up and leave, I just want a few things. I really want to recognize 2 people in particular who, honestly, this conference would have not run without. One of them, stand up, Brooks McDonald. So I called Mr. Terry, I don't remember if it was in April or May, in tears when he was like, we need to put all this whole thing online, and started talking IT stuff. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not doing that. And he was like, call Brooks. So thank you so much. And then I think she's already left, but I snagged Joanne Pupecki from Frisco to work for me this last couple weeks. And she and her parent volunteers were amazing. And finally, I really want to express our deepest appreciation for Pastor Robert Jordan and his staff at Hope Fellowship. They've been amazing. So on that note, on your way out, if you will look around in the sanctuary, we want to leave their sanctuary nice and clean. Take your books, take your trash, take your notepads and your pen, and have a great in-service in the next week and a half. Bye.